We're live. Oh, wow. Jeremy didn't screw up the opening this time. I think we're live, right?
Wait, I can't breathe, man. I'm wow, Jesus.
Let's go. Actually, yeah, I see us on there. We're live. All right, cool. So welcome back to episode, what, are we episode 14? Or did you screw that up?
14.
All right, episode 14. As always, we'll start out talking about the market. Yesterday was pretty ugly. Readers of my newsletter know I've kind of been expecting some sort of sell-off. Market was totally overbought. The excuse was the bond auction. Don't know that it was necessarily that bad, but you've got a lot of forces moving against bonds. And yesterday, the 10-year went above kind of the Liberation Day high. And if you remember back then, it was a huge problem. So still a huge problem. Real hard for stocks to do anything meaningful, as the 10-year ticks closer and closer to 5%. Drop of relief today, market pretty much flat. The other kind of big thing is Bitcoin. Second. Bitcoin making all-time highs, nice uptrend, kind of a classic uptrend, since Liberation Day. We've been talking about this in the newsletter for a while, that, the places you want to be are, Bitcoin, crypto related, the crypto treasury companies, all of that stuff. And, so far so good. That's been paying off. We'll see where the market goes from here. In my mind, now you got to be watching the 10-year. There are still opportunities, still risk on. I mean, I'm looking at my screen right now. The quantum names are just insane. And again, some of the crypto stuff, and Jeremy and my favorite nuclear Oklo is going parabolic today. So, there are still opportunities out there.
What's Oklo?
It's a nuclear company.
Oh,
it's like,
Oklo. That one.
Nuclear company that has no earnings.
That Oklo.
Maybe no prospects of earnings, but
got it.
Every once in a while it goes parabolic.
I know the stock. All right.
Yeah. So Jeremy, what are you thinking here?
We love to say the word chased, and that's Oklo's story for now. And same with that other one that I kicked off, Lightbridge. Whoa. That was the other one that we were working with not so long ago. Market-wise, I'm with you. I definitely started trimming a lot of my equities going into yesterday on the opening high, and then I kind of started looking into more themes. So like we cracked on it in the newsletter with the Golden Dome project. I think there's a lot of sleepers to be had there, or maybe at least a couple sleepers to be had there, and we might dig into those a little bit more into that theme.
Mid-cap defense names are one of my favorite themes.
Absolutely.
They're not running right now as much as some of the other stuff, but the Kratos, the AVAV, the Palantir, and I cannot wait until Anduril goes public. That's right. Going to be a monster.
Yeah, I agree. And that's going to be something to be ahead of. So stay tuned.
I'm hoping they go public through a SPAC, because obviously we have SPCX, but having SPCX, we'd probably get an allocation. But I'm not optimistic they're going to go the SPAC route.
Right.
Yeah, dang shame. That would be very lucrative. But
oh man, that would be so much fun.
But needless to say, I mean, we've got our own portfolios. We can pile into the right theme and catch the sleepers and get ahead of it. But we've been there before. We love doing that stuff. And being ahead of it it's part chart technician and part research. I'm a research junkie. I love digging deep into stuff, sometimes deeper than I need to. It consumes a bunch of my time, but it's worthwhile. Just do a deep dive once in a while. And AI really helps you with that, by the way.
Yep. All right, Pat, you want to introduce our guest here?
Oh, hey, hi. Hey, this is Christopher Manske. He's from Manske Wealth Management in Houston. It says here, hopefully it's true, that you're the third fastest growing RIA in Texas last year. That's cool. So maybe talk about that a little bit, how you did that. because some of our guys are advisors. They probably want to hear how you made it so big, I guess. And then he wrote this book, and this is why. Can you put it up, Matt? Because it's hard to flash. He wrote this
Yeah,
book called Out.
your background.
Yeah, I
is,
know, I know. He wrote Outsmart. You have the picture though. He wrote this book called Outsmart Money Managers. It champions an individual investor. This is what we are about, basically. I'm just going to read like one sentence here. A Wall Street insider draws back the curtain on how financial firms take advantage of individual investors and delivers the information and insights you need to turn the tables. That's on a book review. Chris,
You
welcome.
seeing it?
Yep, there it is. There he is right there.
There it is. All right. Yeah, glad to be here, guys.
So go ahead, Chris. So
Well, since Chris is in wealth management, let's get his take on the market.
oh yeah, go please.
Well, I guess top of mind for me at the moment is I'm seeing that the 30-year yield on U.S. bonds is flirting with the high since the last financial crisis. And I think there's a lot of pressure right now, and it's all coming from the White House. Some people are happy about it, some people aren't, depending on politics. But I'm with you guys when you all talk about you're nervous about the market pulling back. I also am, and a lot of that is tied to how does this country take care of its obligations?
Yeah, can I just pop into that, because this is a conversation Jeremy and I were having. I want to ask Matt and you, Chris. So, what do you think about the debt rating downgrade? I mean, I think it's like a non-event, but others seem to feel differently. So, I think I was wrong in saying that. I said that last Friday.
No. I mean, I think it's a non-event too.
Yeah. Okay.
The first one I was trading. I mean, I'm old. I was trading August 2011. I remember that vividly. That was an ugly month. Luckily, I got out on August 2nd and put everything into treasuries and had a really good month. But that I vividly remember that month. It was really, really, really bad. I mean, it was the worst we had since 2008. But this time around, I don't think so.
Chris, you?
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly that it's not the event that it used to be. In fact, I wrote about that in my first book, this concept that, when it's brand new, it's a lot more scary. And so the first downgrade was, it really was met with a lot of market volatility. But this one, I think, was a blip on the radar. I don't think people cared that much, which is sad, because just because people don't care about it, that doesn't mean it's unimportant. I think it's very important. I wish that we were seeing rating agencies feel confidence in the way that we're handling our affairs. And, maybe someday we'll get back to that AAA rating, all the way across the board.
I'll take the under on that one. I mean, I don't think you're going to get congressmen, presidents, regardless of party, to stop spending. I think the way the system is designed, I really, really hope I'm wrong. But
well, it's probably there's some path that we're going to walk, and it's either going to end in really difficult times, or it's going to begin with really difficult times. And I think what you're saying is, I don't believe that it's going to begin with the difficult times.
Well, yeah, I mean, juicing the spending, makes everyone happy until one day, the music stops and the chair's not there.
Yeah.
We'll see when that day is. I mean, that's, or my kids will see when that day is.
Yeah, I was going to say, might be a little while. I was going to inject a little bit, though. I came across an article the other day. I mean, pointing towards, why Trump 2.0 wouldn't be as interested in a strong dollar, more or less. You kind of see that as maybe part of the plan is kicking off to kind of cut the value or cut the strength of the U.S. dollar just a little bit to kind of help boost things, boost trade, that sort of thing.
I have read a little bit about that, and I think that this is the pro and con of any movement in currency is there's always someone that's glad that the currency's more valuable, and there's always someone that's glad that the currency is less valuable. To me, I think that if it's going to help us to take care of our debt situation and handle our overall monetary obligations better, then that's something that's, worthwhile. And, and I'm not sure that weakening the dollar is helping with that. What do you guys think on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a much bigger plan. I think the plan is generate money from tariffs, cut spending from Doge, lower interest rates, so your debt financing isn't as much.
But rates are going up.
I'm saying the plan.
Yeah, the plan.
Oh, I see.
Trump doesn't control the 10-year.
Nope.
So I get that. And
Maybe it's the plan.
And and bring stuff back here, have GDP go up, and you take care of the deficit. There's a lot of moving parts to that plan and a lot of things Trump doesn't control. And, I think I love Doge. I think from a cutting meaningful spending standpoint, it's been, less than useful. Obviously you've got, the big bad bill that doesn't really cut spending. I don't know that we're seeing an impact from tariffs, and the bond vigilantes are saying F you, and we're going to bring rates up. So, remains to be seen whether they can pull this all off. But, he's got another 3.5 years, so we will see. I think if you want to try to get rich betting against Trump, that's probably not a good thing to do.
Agreed.
So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and see how things go, but so far it's not going according to plan.
So Chris, what are your clients saying back to you? Like, you're smart guys you talk to a lot, like the good ones. What do they think?
Well, it's real similar to what we just heard. Like I talk to people on both sides of the aisle pretty regularly.
Right.
At McGraw-Hill's my publisher. I mean, the publishing world is typically a more liberal side of things compared to Wall Street. And whether it's talking to professionals or clients, I hear a lot of the same thing when it comes to like Doge. You'd said, yeah, I like Doge. They're cutting costs, but I know that there's a lot of angst surrounding this. This plan, like, oh, the tariffs aren't going to work, or the interest rates are going down, or Doge is doing the wrong thing. But I'm not sure that really when you get an individual in front of you and you say, hey, Doge is saving billions of dollars, is that good or bad? I mean, I have yet to find someone that say, oh, it's terrible.
Right. Yeah,
and I don't know, maybe you guys are seeing something different.
I think it slows the roll, actually. I think like if, just because it's not cutting, at least it's helping grow it slower, or it's, stem the growth or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my thought on Doge.
I mean, it is cutting. It's just not cutting enough.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Both you guys. So if I said that all liberals are bearish right now and all Republicans are bullish, would you agree with that? Or do you think that's just a false premise? Because that's how it seems to me, and
I think that's a false premise. I mean,
I'm with you.
Certainly there are people who bring politics into their investment decision-making. And again, I've never seen anyone get rich using politics to decide, how to invest.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Politics and values. I mean, I don't know how you feel about ESG. I'm not a fan. To me, if you've got, value types of concerns, make as much money as you can and, donate it to the causes that are important. To me, investing should be about investing. Where can I make the most money with the least risk?
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I can add that, I've said many times that it doesn't really matter which president got in on this term. It happens to be Trump, but whichever one got in, the market's overbought, the market's high, and we've got to be ready for, a pullback of some sort. And we can tie why is it high to a lot of things. And that's where politics comes in when you explain the why of things. But, if you're just wanting to help people make money and to be ahead of whatever the next move is, you can use politics to inform the decision, but don't let it blind you. And so I do think that it's wrong to say that all Republicans say bullish and all Democrats or liberals say bearish. I think that there's going to be that on the fringe where they're just blinded by politics. But in the middle, I think people are rational. I think they don't always act rational, but I think that they realize that there is a difference between the value of their investment and politics.
It's probably just on Twitter.
One thing I'll add to that,
Yeah.
an important caveat, is you do want to pay attention to Trump. Biden, you did not have to pay attention to as an investor. There was not a whole the Inflation Reduction Act at the beginning. Yeah, you wanted to see what was going on there. Beyond that, I can't remember anything where, I was writing in my newsletter, hey, Biden's doing this, Biden's saying this, you got to watch out. None of that. Trump is telling you when to get in and out of the market. And the biggest beneficiaries year to date have been people in Trump's orbit. So stocks of people in Trump's orbit and Trump's favored asset classes. We know Trump loves crypto. Remember that chart of Bitcoin I just showed you?
Right.
Yeah, Trump is not 100% responsible for that. I mean, what's going on fiscally is doing it, but having a rabidly pro-crypto president, crypto czar, crypto-favored SEC, certainly creates a different backdrop this year than we had last year.
Right.
I've been hearing a lot about how it's also wise to look at what Trump doesn't say. When he's quiet about something, it's kind of like, wow, why wouldn't he have said something there? And I know, Jeremy, you said you like to go down the rabbit hole to sometimes. Have you heard that before or seen something like that?
Quite a bit. We've noticed that charts tend to wander in a range sideways and when he is quiet. And then our job as technical analysts is to try and pick out which direction we think it's going to go once the silence is broken. And that's kind of a definite effect on the market. I'm always an advocate, and for newer traders, this is something that they kind of have to develop, is the ability to keep emotions out of their trading. Well, politics are really emotionally charged, and that's a definite trigger that's going to probably mess you up for being able to be a good analyst, because you have to start with being a good analyst. Go down that rabbit hole, and you can use it as an idea of, okay, there's something that's likely to trigger volatility here. How can I take advantage of that? Rather than being in the mode of, oh, I'm going to trade this way because of this statement. It's more of a volatility trigger and find a way to take advantage of it type of situation.
All right, last thing on this topic, man.
Wait.
So,
Hold on. Another kind of important point along those lines. So we're working on an ETF. It's either going to be called the government graft ETF or the government grift. I can't decide which one it is.
I like grift.
ChatGPT says it's graft, so I don't know. But I think it's, yes, what Trump doesn't say, but also how he says things. Like, to me, when Trump said, I don't look at the stock market, that was a signal to, like, Carl Icahn, Carl, get out of the market. Trump can't call Carl and say, Carl, I'm about to announce really bad tariffs, and Bessent's telling me that the market's going to crash on this. Get the heck out. Right. But if Trump says, hey, I don't really watch the market, anyone who knows Trump is like, wait, Trump, number one, the market was a report card.
Yep.
He's telling me something here without telling me something here. And he can't. I mean, Trump can come out. I mean, you could argue that he shouldn't, but he can come out and say, hey, buy U.S. stocks. Trump cannot come out and say sell. I mean, that would be bad if Trump came out and said, yeah, don't buy our stocks.
Well, you've answered my question, because my question to Chris was like, give me an example of what he hasn't said, but that was the answer. All right, sweet. So I'm going to switch up a little bit here. So, you've said something in your book, Chris, right? Well, you said, this is kind of funny, actually. I laughed when I read this.
Did you read his book?
Dude, I did. Right here, bro. Come on, dude. It's right here. Right here. You can see there's wrinkles in it and everything. I opened it. All right.
Stop.
And there's actually like little bookmark folds and stuff. Come on. See
that fold right there? Audio version?
See that fold right there? I asked him for the movie, but he didn't have it, or comic book, but he didn't have that either.
There is an audio version, yeah.
We're going to reach out to LeVar Burton.
All right. So it's funny. What you said was, don't hire your uncle as your investment advisor, right? And I think that is like the greatest like one-liner of the whole book, man. So I know these guys will laugh, and I know these guys will tag onto this, but like,
I mean, my uncle's like 98, so
but
that's good advice.
I think that's the best advice you can give someone. So talk about that a little bit, and use that as a segue to talk about the book a little bit. And I'll fill in some spaces. I mean, I've read it, I have some questions, but maybe you can cover all of it.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm happy to. So with that advice, I actually gave that advice for a very different reason than what most readers expect, because I think most people are thinking, well, they're close to you, it'll mess up the relationship. They're gonna not give you the service they would give to their other customers. It could be that you're expecting like special deals, and all of that is real, but none of that is the reason that I thought it was important enough to add it to my comments in the book. And the reason I put it in there is because when people are hiring a professional money manager to help them with their finances, one of the things that is really important in that interaction is real trust, real belief in their investing capability. And that's different from trust and belief in them as a person. Like, oh, I know you care about me, but I also would like to know that you're an expert at this job. And so if you pick them just because they're a relative and you like them and you trust them, then what happens is when the market goes down, you're not really able to have the kind of interaction that you would have had if you really believe in what they're saying, and when you really trust in their ability as an investment advisor. So that's the main reason for it. Is it's inevitable. The market's going to go down, and they're going to have some years where the portfolio is not looking so great. Maybe it's just months. Maybe they're really special, and there's just a few months it looks really bad. But still, during that time frame, you're going to want to be able to have a conversation that's built on, I actually believe that this person's an expert at investing, and it's not built on, oh, well, I see him every Thanksgiving, I know he's a good person. That doesn't work.
Right.
That makes
Comments?
sense.
Anything in the background, guys?
Only uncle I ever listened to is we coined the phrase. We call him Uncle Elon when he says something about Tesla. We can need some advice here.
I think in these types of things, it's difficult to hire friends and family, because what happens if you do hire your uncle as your advisor, and he turns out to be a moron?
How do you fire him, right?
Well, I mean, but that can get difficult. So, I do have some friends who, are in roles for me. I don't mind doing that, especially, when it's a role that I know a lot about, but I just don't have time to deal with it, type of thing. But I certainly do have sympathy for people who say, look, I won't do business with friends or relatives. I mean, that's why I do the podcast with Pat and Jeremy. I hate these guys. So, if they end up, really getting worse than they already are, I just get rid of them, and I don't feel bad about it at all.
Well, to me, the best scenario is you hire somebody, and in
any
professional capacity, you hire them because they're really, really good at what they do. And then over time, you develop a deep friendship, and you can say things like, I hate these guys, and we all know exactly what it means.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So next question. So you also comment about the term advisor, like advisor, there's a million different terms for advisor. I mean, it's kind of another internal joke I have, it's just, there's so many names, but explain what you mean when you say, don't, buy someone's title, basically.
Right. Man, I'm glad you asked me that. So that's one of my real beefs with Wall Street as a whole, is I think that people are hanging a shingle out with a title on it, and the public that they're serving thinks that title means something. And it doesn't mean that. And they choose this title purposefully so that they have that, that kind of air of capability that they don't deserve. They don't deserve it. And so you'll see people that they sell insurance policies for a living, but they have the exact same title as somebody who, does day trading, as the exact same title as somebody who, is, doing specific bond management. These things, they're all very different disciplines. And to make it worse, I really have another beef with Wall Street in this same area where someone will say, I have 30 years of financial experience. I'm a financial advisor. I have 30 years financial experience. And when you look at their resume, 10 years was a mortgage broker, 10 years was a wholesaler selling mutual funds to other advisors.
Right.
It's like, hey, what you're doing here is wrong. This is not appropriate. And, and I think it's stuff like this. I mean, the book is filled with these kinds of, hey, Wall Street, you got to do this better. And this is why McGraw-Hill published it, is because, it's just too straightforward. There's no way someone's going to disagree with that. It's just
Right.
wrong.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. So a few years ago, I used to have a wealth management firm. We're actually doing it again because what I see out there is just awful. At the time I was a CFP, didn't mean anything. I didn't learn anything through the CFP curriculum that I didn't already know. I thought a lot of the stuff they taught was wrong. A good chunk of the stuff. And then you had CLU, CHTFC, and then you had guys just creating, designations, certified retirement advisor, certified senior advisor. And, you'd run across these guys that had like 7 certifications and they're morons. It's, it really doesn't mean anything. And, and also, I agree. It's kind of, the experience thing. Do you want the young doctor who's on the cutting edge, or do you want the old doctor who's still putting leeches on you? You could make arguments both ways, and then you could have a lot of experience, but is a good experience.
I think leeches are coming back, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
So the next question. So you talk about finding an advisor. So how do you find a good advisor? What's a good advisor, Chris?
Well, everybody's got a different approach because they have different needs. But I think that the way they go about it should be the same. I mean, you're going to end up with a different advisor because your needs are going to match up with that one. But the way you go about it, I think, there's a good way to do it, and there's bad ways. And to me, one of the things to do is to look for someone who is known in the community. And nowadays, community could mean the whole country. I mean, it just depends on what it means to that individual, if they want to go and shake the person's hand or not. But someone in the community that is known for the expertise that you're looking for. And you can't just do it like in the back room, like, oh, hey, Frank said that
Right.
Johnny is really good at
Right.
at mowing lawns. Well, that's not enough. You need to get references and maybe talk to someone who would be adjacent to Johnny, the lawn guy. Say, hey, you work with sprinkler systems. Tell me about Johnny. So
Right.
there's a little bit of extra effort that goes into making this work, and I think it's a shame that people will often handle a professional relationship like hiring an attorney, hiring a CPA, hiring a financial advisor. They'll handle that the same way as picking out a movie or picking out their lawn guy, which it's really, there is going to be different consequences to the decision. So maybe the approach should merit a little more effort.
Yeah, and I have a lot of thoughts on this. Yeah,
Same.
and I agree with your last comment wholeheartedly. I mean, our society lives on delegation. I just went to the dentist today and had dental surgery. I couldn't do that myself. I needed the dentist to do it. Yeah, and there are a whole bunch of other things that maybe I could do, I don't have time to do. And like, a lawn guy or whatever, you hire a bad lawn guy, you walk away from that. I mean,
That's right.
Well-
all right, a couple of my plants died, no big deal.
What if he
You
like runs over
hire
your
the
foot while
wrong
you're walking across the
financial
lawn?
guy,
That could
and
get bad.
and you've got a problem. And so what I've always told people is education is key, because so many people in this business got into, and they're good and they're bad in every business. A lot of people in this business got into it because they're really good at sales. I started out at one of the big brokerage firms, and the top guys were all from a sales background. The guys who really knew, the stuff were, spending time researching. The sales guys were like, yeah, we don't need to do that. We're spending our time selling. So yeah, I think you've got to be extremely careful. To me, financial advisors, doctors, those are things you've got to have some education, because you hire the wrong guy and you don't walk away from that.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I mean, you're right. There's good and there's bad. I think let's talk about the worst. In my book, I mentioned Madoff. Madoff existed for two reasons. And one of them is this reason, is that they'd say, oh, my buddy who's really wealthy is working with him, so must be good. And Madoff's approach really, supported and relied on that, hey, so-and-so's with me, so you should be with me too.
Exactly.
And, and that's a shame. There's another thing Madoff did, though, that I think is something that Wall Street needs to do better, is he had the power to create his statements for his customers, as well as, the power to manage the money. And I think nowadays, that's too much power in one place.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's where education comes in a lot, because, guys like us would realize, well, wait a second, I'm dealing with Bernie Madoff and my statement is coming from Bernie Madoff Securities. Okay, all right, who's your auditor? Oh, your auditor is some guy in a, in a strip mall in some small town. Right, that's a little bit weird. But then, all right, what's your strategy? How are you generating 12% a year?
Right.
And, if you are educated on this stuff, it's like, wait, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And if you won't tell me what your strategy is, then.
But if the money's popping in your account and you're spending it, how do you argue with that?
Tough.
Yeah,
he got
you know what I mean?
people to give him billions of dollars because he didn't come out and say, I'm going to give you 100% a year. He came out and said, I'm going to give you 12. Yeah. And, so I think that kind of,
good example though.
A lot of people.
I've got two parts to add to that. So on the part of one, being educated is very, very important. I'm not even religious, but I always follow the tale, teach a man to fish. I believe in that. And if anybody's going to not necessarily hire anybody as a financial advisor, but just to ask people, what's hot right now or what's good to look into, I'm always going to come back with, okay, well, do your own diligence. But first I'm going to go to say, learn how to do your own due diligence. And I can talk to people on a level and be like, if you look into this, you might find some details that might be worth looking at and maybe making some investment choices on. That's kind of the way to go. And then on the back end of that, you mentioned Bernie Madoff. I look into the strategy. One of the strategies he was advertising to have been doing, and it was later proven, and that's kind of what broke him, because there was not enough options being traded to even sustain what he was doing. But it's the strategy I use, and it works for me personally. The wheel trade strategy. I'm selling options on both sides. It's essentially taking a page out of the advertisement that Bernie Madoff had, but anybody can make that work if they study hard enough, and that's the whole point, is be educated, start learning at least where to look, and start there, and then you can kind of build your own.
So
I could add a quick something there.
Go, please.
I bump into folks a lot that they say, I'm going to do this on my own, and my first advice to them is, of course, be educated, but before getting educated, get into a group of people that are doing it as well. Have a network. Ask them, how do they know? Where did they get their information? And run things by them. Because if you're all alone, or you're just going off of like a printed note on the computer screen from someone you've never shaken hands with, you're probably not at the top of your game. And have the humility to get into a group where you guys can have sharpened knives, and really, poke holes in your bad ideas.
Or at least a trading Discord, like Jeremy's, an animal in, right, Jay?
And the power of community is huge, guys.
It's so important.
Yeah.
All right. So next question. It's kind of a segue from the consistent returns of Madoff to you saying, your book. What I learned most in your book, by the way, the way you talk about consistent returns and how kind of Wall Street tries to sell you in kind of an average return versus kind of your compounding is going to be a lot stronger with a consistent return. I mean, can you talk about that a little bit? I think that's the most powerful aspect of your book, by the way.
Well, thank you for saying so. I have had so many conversations with people that they're upset because they're hearing from a friend about really good return, and they don't have that return. And they're like, hey, I'm firing my advisor. I want to come and work with you. And we're looking at their situation and like, look, this is really good. You're upset. What is your friend telling you? And then there's always this kind of, static, like, wait a minute, the screen is not so clear. Once you want to know the details of the golfing buddies portfolio, well, all we know is, the average return. And so I really laid out as clear as I could in Outsmart the Money Magicians that when people say, hey, I've got a 12% annual return, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, you really can't take that to the bank and make decisions off of that. When someone says, I made 20% return on average over the last 10 years, it doesn't mean what we would like it to mean. And the math there is really deceptive. And I think it's also because we as humans, we kind of gravitate toward easy math as opposed to the accurate math. Yeah. And the easy math is wrong. An average annual return does not align with the dollars. There's a different math for telling you, what actual money is in the account compared to what you put in. But people, they like the easy way, and it's a problem. It really is. If I had my way, I'd make it, just mandatory for anybody that's reporting to someone else about their portfolio that you can clearly see money in and money out. And this average annual return stuff, I just get away from it. There's no use for that except for a sale. That's all it's good for, is helping people feel good about signing on the dotted line.
Got it. Anybody?
Very excellent points.
So then the last part about your book is another interesting thing is, how do you know how your investments are doing, right? Like, how does, like Matt, like, how does someone know how they're doing? Let me start with you this time. Like, if I just, how do you know how you're doing? Like, oh, he just said I'm up 18% a year or whatever. How do you know if that's good or bad? Or, how does someone define that?
That comes down to education, where you've got to understand, the investment strategy that you're in, and then the market environment. So, I mean, if it was 2008 and, and you're down 10%, some people might think that's awesome. If it's 2003 and you're up 8%, some people might think that's awesome. Some people might think that sucks. So, it depends. There are different market environments. Whatever you're doing is going to do different in that market environment. And there are different investment strategies. Some people take more risk than other people take. Me, I'm 56. If my portfolio doubles, that doesn't change my lifestyle. But if it goes down 50%, it does. So, I'm going to be more conservative. I'm up a decent amount this year, and I'm happy with it. If I were more aggressive, I would have been up a lot more this year, but I'm not. And, I'm not going to be more aggressive because that's not where I want to be. So to me, I'm having a good year. And I think one of the other things people ought to do consistently is, what did you do right and what did you do wrong? And don't make the same mistake twice. And what did you do wrong is not buying a stock that went down, because if your analysis, you're not going to get all of them except for Jeremy. Right. You're not going to get them all right. But if you bought a stock and it went down and you overrode your analysis, all right, or even if you bought a stock and it went up, but you overrode your analysis, that may be a mistake too.
So, Chris, I'm going to ask you this question in a different way, though. Okay. So
well,
let's say,
if you don't mind, I would love to comment on what Matt just said.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's something coming here.
Yeah, so this
Sorry.
whole time, I mean, we've been talking and everything Matt has said, I've been thinking, man, I agree 100%. I need to add in something, but I just agree with what he's saying. But finally, I think I can push back a little bit here.
Let's go. All right. And we don't mind
The
that
debate.
here.
Yeah,
Plot
here we
thickens.
go.
Hey,
So
I broke a guy's ribs once. I told those guys earlier.
yeah, ball bat to the knees here. So I really think that when professionals say that the answer to the question, how do you know if you're doing good with your money, that the answer is it depends. I think that we should do better. I think Wall Street owes people a straightforward answer.
And one thing, if you were a client and we were talking about your money, I would not say it depends. So you're right.
Okay.
That's probably a good way to lose a client.
Let me interject.
okay.
All right, my question was going to be this, Chris.
Oh,
Do
hold
you
on,
think
let Chris answer. He's
Well, no,
on-
no, no. This may help. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say you're defining
doesn't, but all right, go ahead.
can you define success, investment success, by putting returns and standard deviation of returns on the same chart and picking a quadrant and saying, oh yeah, this is the spot we're supposed to be? Does that define success?
No, it doesn't. And I think that for me, it does not. I bet that there's a lot of folks that is a part of their sales process. That's a part of their, like managing expectations of the people that have hired them. It's their part of their process. But no, the reason I think that you can't say it depends is because of stuff like that. To me, the answer is very clear. You should have a goal. So let's say your goal is 20 years from now. There's something you're shooting for, and there's a reason that you're shooting for it. This isn't just, oh, you know what? My goal is I want to beat the market. Well, okay, but why? Like what is the point of investing? You're putting
Right.
risk out there. Why are you doing that? There should be some goal. And once we know that goal, then it's just a march each year. And when we say, oh, we made 12%, is that good or bad? Okay, let's look at the amount of money we've got. Are we on track for that goal? Because if we're on track or a bit ahead, then yeah, we're doing good. If we're on track and a bit behind, well, we need to do something. We need to examine the situation. Do we need to make changes? And if we're not on track and we're way behind, well, this is called accountability. Maybe it's time to fire an advisor. Maybe it's time to make a major change to the portfolio and keep the advisor. Maybe you've got a good relationship. But I think that the chart you just described of like, hey, we've got your risk profile. We know how you feel about investing and your money is in that quadrant. So we're successful. I think that is the lack of accountability that is part of my inspiration for the book, Outsmart the Money Magicians.
Yeah, nothing there I would disagree with. Definitely progress towards your goal is, the end result you want. If you want to retire at 65 and you've got enough money to retire at 65, then you did what you needed to do.
Yeah, and when you're doing a really great job, both parties, they're going to be aware of the truth that you're way ahead of the game, but you don't change that end goal just because you're way ahead of the game, because between now and that end goal, there's probably going to be a pullback and you want to be ready for it, And so, if it's bad communication, then you've got somebody who's thinking, hey, look, I'm so far ahead of the game. This is what I've got. And then the next year when it's down 10% because the market's really bad or they made a bad choice, then they're pulling their hair out. Oh, this is horrible. I'm down 10%. Well, hold on a second. We're still ahead of the game when it comes to the goal, like how much money you have.
Yeah. So the question, do you think when your customer or like your clients come to you, they save more after they've talked to you? Or do you see if I came and talked to you, I'd probably be like, shit, I got to save more money. And then I'd save more. Do you see that? Or,
yeah, I see two things. I see that they save more, which is kind of the same thing as spending less. They'll spend less because of our interaction, but they'll save more. And then the second thing is they'll save differently. So what most people they're doing is they're putting their money into their checking account. Like they're working at a job, their money goes to their checking account, and then they're fooled by Wall Street with the whole pay yourself first baloney.
Yeah.
And then that goes to the savings account. But what we'll do is we'll guide them to, blow that up every cent that comes into your life, every cent, whether it's from a garage sale, from a bonus at the end of the year, from your regular W-2 salary, whatever, every cent goes to your savings first. And then you actually pay yourself first the proper way, because you set your lifestyle and you pay yourself to your checking account the specific amount that you want for your lifestyle. And so that way you don't get fooled into, oh, I paid myself first, I saved, so everything that's left over, it's available. I can spend it. I can throw it at the BMW. No, you keep your lifestyle, pay yourself first, keep your lifestyle under control so that the savings that you have, your net worth, can really grow.
Should talk to Jeremy. Have you seen his house, man? It's like insane, that place.
All right.
So
I had one statement real quick.
yeah,
This happened to me like literally a few years before I even started trading, because my goal was to replace my income. I stopped calling paydays. I started calling them wealth disbursement day, and it fits exactly into that model. You pay your savings account first, disperse things you need to pay bills and make a living on. The rest of it can go into investment and rolling towards your goals. And at the time, I had a goal of replacing my income as a mechanic. Here I am.
Right. All right. Last thing, Matt's second favorite topic is taxes. So you talk about taxes in your book. Your first is plastic surgery, by the way. The second is taxes. Okay. So
hey, my face has never been touched by plastic surgery.
We've gone over this before, bro. No one believes that. So all right. So you talk about taxes. Go into that a little bit. I'm not really 100% sure. I kind of got lost in the taxes area a little bit, and maybe because it doesn't excite me. But can you talk about what you had to say about taxes?
Yeah, thank you for giving me a chance to talk about it, because there's two things there that I think I would just love to trumpet from the mountaintops. So the first is anybody that wants to save on their taxes and wants to see a change to the tax code, please talk to your representatives about removing contribution limits to tax deferred accounts.
Right.
Like that limit is there just to make sure that we have to pay taxes and we have to be consumers. Like we can't, we can't save it and not pay taxes, because there's a limit. You got to stop saving and now you have to spend the rest. Get out there and be a consumer. And I just think just with that one change, you're going to see that there's a lot of power at the individual level to be able to control their taxes and to lower their taxes. So that's the first thing, is remove contribution limits to deferred accounts. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I just keep saying it over and over again. And then the second thought is really learn and understand the gradient nature of the U.S. tax system.
What does gradient mean?
Yeah, the gradient. So I think all three of you guys, this is old news to you, but there might be one or two listeners that they're not aware that when they make a certain amount of money, and they go into a higher tax bracket, that higher tax bracket doesn't affect all the money they already made. They're not aware of that.
Right.
And so because they're not aware of that, they don't understand the system, and they'll do things to stay out of the higher tax bracket.
All right.
It's like, wait a minute, make as much money as you can.
Right.
We can worry about deductions later, but don't limit yourself on purpose for the sake of saving a few cents on the dollar, because it's a gradient system. It doesn't affect taxes below that threshold. Those are the two thoughts, and I could go deeper into it, Pat, if you think it's worth it.
Oh, Matt, you have anything?
No, I mean, I would agree 100%. You want to save now. The one caveat I would have is I would not let the tax tail wag the dog.
Right.
I will never forget sitting down, with an accountant telling me a 2008 story, about a client who came in. All of his portfolio was in a small regional bank, and the client didn't want to sell it because he'd have a capital gain.
Right.
That bank basically went under in 2008. accountant's like, I got good news and bad news. No capital gain anymore, but your bank went to zero.
Yeah.
So I'd be careful there. I don't know where you come down on insurance products, but I advise people to just be careful there. And a lot of times those are sold purely on tax. And I would say read through, understand exactly what you're getting, and make sure without the tax benefit, it still makes sense. So that would be the only caveat, is just don't let the tax tail. And I don't know where you come on muni bonds. I'm typically not a fan of muni bonds. I'm not a fan of any bonds, but muni bonds as well.
How about Barry bonds?
What bonds?
Barry.
I can talk a little bit to the insurance and municipal bonds. So
Barry bonds.
I don't have much for the Barry bond side of it, but on the insurance side, I think you and I might see things very similar once again, because when somebody says the benefit to you here is that you'll save taxes, that's probably not enough benefit, because usually when we're saving taxes, that also means that we're not getting the other 65 cents or the other 70 cents on that dollar. And I'd much rather get the profit. Like, go ahead,
Exactly.
receive the profit and pay your taxes.
Right.
So I am very much against that kind of sale of the insurance product. And then with the municipal bond, I talk about this a little bit in the book as well. But for municipal bonds, I think Wall Street is really pulling one over on the public because of the way they report on municipal bonds. Someone will buy a bond at a little bit above par, which means that when the bond matures, they won't get that money back. It's guaranteed they won't get it back. They're going to get the par value back. But in the reporting of the yield, when they pull up their statement online or in the mail, that fact is not a part of the math. So they're looking at
that. I did not know. That's interesting.
Yeah, they're looking at a yield that is for sure it's wrong.
Right.
It's not accurate, because we know that that it's not it's not going to return what we paid in. And and I think then when you add in the fact that there might be an advisor who's collecting some kind of a fee off of you holding that municipal bond. I mean, a lot of times these muni bonds, the effective yield is 0 to 1%. Like, it's not even past 1%. Very common. Maybe we'll see that change as interest rates get bigger, but going back a decade, there's a lot of that. And there was very little writing about it. I think maybe like 4 or 5 articles. For some reason, we just accept that, Wall Street doesn't have to report that accurately. And instead they report it in a way that makes the viewer feel good about the purchase. Oh, look, I'm making this big yield, but no, you're not.
Yeah, it's very sensationalized.
Where do you come down on bonds? So, and again, feel free to disagree with me. I'm not a fan. I do not think bonds are a hedge, because to me, a hedge is something that works every single time. If I'm going to put a hedge in my portfolio, I don't want to see, all right, the market was down 1.64%. Oh man, my bonds are down too. This sucks. So I don't see them as a hedge. I think maybe back in my grandmother's day, you could use bonds to generate income because interest rates were like 18%. I don't think you want to use bonds to generate income today. Even if the 30-year goes to 5, that's still not enough. So I will trade bonds. I think, if you can educate yourself, you could probably do pretty well in distressed debt. If you know what you're doing, maybe you can do well in preferreds. But beyond that, I find bonds pretty much useless. Curious your take.
Well, I think that where you and I, we have the same idea, is that when you get real granular and you do your homework, there's money to be made. Like, if you really know the preferred market and you know the
But you've got to know it.
Yeah, then there's money to be made.
Guy.
Another one would be like
convertibles.
convertible bonds.
Convertibles too, if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, if you're really deep into it. But I think that with your comment of just in general, bonds are not a hedge. I do see that differently. I think that I still see merit to the Markowitz work that showed that these asset classes offset each other. But I understand that there's some angst because the bond market has not been moving that differently than the stock market recently, and maybe that's how it is going to be forever. Maybe we're in a new normal. But I always get itchy with the whole "we're in a new normal." Like I think,
and I don't think so. I mean, if there's a global crisis, you're going into treasuries. But I look at like 2022. I look at yesterday, and that's where I take issue. But totally, I see where you're coming from on that as well.
Where I really wish that people would maybe put a little more energy when it comes to bond investing is getting away from mutual funds, because a lot of the power of that bond purchase is your ability to control when you sell it. If you choose to hold it to maturity for your individual needs, that's a powerful choice, as opposed to, hey, it's actually up a little bit right now and I could sell it for a bigger yield, and on and on. But you lose all that capability when you hold it in a fund. And then on top of it, the yield you're getting is immediately less because the fund manager has to get paid. And so, I'd like to see
the advisor has to get paid, and yep.
Is there?
Do you buy? Do you buy individual bonds for your clients?
We do.
All right. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. I'm an ETF guy. Same thing on the ETF side. Most of these bond ETFs just suck.
Yeah, so, that's a deal. I was going to interject. Like, is there a middle of the road to be had with like corporate bonds? Is that any kind of thing to get into on the investment side for an advisor such as yourself?
Well, I think that middle of the road you're describing, it's a lot bigger path than it used to be. With the American government bond having a lower rating now, there are big corporations that, it's not weird to say that they have a bigger, better chance of repaying their debt holders than the U.S. government. And it hurts me to say that. I'm a patriot. I have a military background. I'm not saying that as a stab at America. I'm saying it as just a matter of, look, we want to do right. We want to look at what's out there and systemically increase our odds of making money. And I think there is a bit more of a middle ground today than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, just because of the national debt makes our repayment of debt just slightly more questionable.
So, Chris, you're buying
more and more questionable.
You're buying corporates for your clients?
We do.
So, how low do you go in ratings? Do you ever have people that stomach B's and C's and all that, or are you staying the A's?
No, and we don't either. Like I said, you want to get into it and really know what you're looking at. And so to ignore, the rating agencies and do something, that's in the, junk bond area, we're not comfortable doing that.
So you're
I
saying
know
that
there are some, but that's
guys like me and Chris could argue whether bonds are a hedge or not. I don't think we have any argument that, a junk bond or a distressed bond is a hedge.
For sure.
That's a trade, and that's only a trade you make if you really, really know what you're doing and you understand the risk.
So do you buy preferreds for your clients?
We do.
Okay. So I'm going to just get a question, and then I guess we can call it. So how do you handle the call feature on a preferred, and do you get pushback on that? That's only be my concern in buying a preferred. Rates go down, you own a bond, you still own it. Rates go down 2 years from now, the preferred's getting taken away. So how do you? I don't know what the word is. How do you justify that? Let's say.
Yeah. I think that sometimes it can be hard. I don't want to be Pollyannish and say oh, we always have a plan. Sometimes we'll have a preferred for a client, and then we don't have it anymore. And we got to figure out, okay, what are we going to do now with that capital? And, the good news is that, there should be some space. We don't have to deploy that right that same second.
Right.
Hey, it was called today at 10 and by tomorrow at 10, we've got it back in. We might use money market or find some short-term bond that, real ultra short-term bond that we can use to give us a window. But yeah, I mean, that is a piece of the puzzle. I think a bigger piece of the puzzle is the cumulative aspect of preferreds, because people nowadays it seems like there's a real a lack of education around the cumulative aspect of the preferred market. And we wouldn't ever touch a preferred stock that isn't cumulative. It's got to be cumulative.
Explain that.
Yeah, sure. So these preferred stocks, most of them, there's a yield associated with. There's a payment that you expect, but it's not required. They can not pay you if they want to. But then with the cumulative cumulative preferred, the contract requires that the length of time you own, whether they chose to pay out or not, it doesn't matter. They owe you that income. So
Right.
it accumulates. That's why they call it a cumulative. So
Right.
if the company's on hard times and they're not making that payment to you, they still owe it to you. You still
Right.
are owed. And that's a powerful piece of the puzzle.
All right, last thing, one more minute. So, like, what's the yield on a preferred versus, like, say you have a AA corporate, like, and you had a AA preferred, like, what's the yield spread and something like that? Like, is it over like
Put the
100
guy
basis
on the
points?
spot, why don't you, Pat?
Well,
Right?
no, I mean, is it over? Well, no, I mean,
This is
I'm just
good,
trying to
though.
help. I'm trying to help you because
Yeah.
I mean, because I think
what's the
I like
airspeed
preferreds.
of an unladen African
All
swallow?
right, never mind. All right. All right, my bad. Sorry, dude. I got you. I just thought you'd know. I don't know. I don't know either. But I think it's more. So let's say you get 1% more by owning a preferred than you'd own by owning the corporate. It's probably like 1%. I would
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more.
So I have a tough time with those spreads because, especially when we're talking about preferreds, because preferreds, they're volatile. I mean, they move a lot. If it
Right.
came out at 25 a share, I mean, you could see it at 30, you could see it at 15. I mean, they really
Right. They
they
swing,
fluctuate
yeah.
a lot. And so because of that fluctuation, I mean, the yield, of course, is up and down too.
Right.
So, if you make a good buy, you're doing it right.
All right. Sorry about that one.
Oh, hey, I'm up for any
was a
ball you
trap.
throw my way. Thank you.
All right. All right.
A trap. No, it's a trap. Sorry.
All right. We good? We good? Thank you, Chris.
I think we're good. This
So-
is great.
how do we find you?
Chris,
Yeah.
How do people find you?
This whole time you've had the book cover up. I mean, they could Google that. That's a great way to do it. But my last name, Manske, there's only one investment Manske in the country, so it's easy to find me that way. My first book and my second book, they're both on Amazon. So if you look me up on Amazon, you'll see it there. Yeah, thanks for asking.
All right. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Well, yeah, and
Thank
for
you.
everyone out there watching, please like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Yes. And thank you for watching, by the way. And thanks
Thank
for
you.
all the likes
You're
we've already gotten. We appreciate it. Have a great
All
one.
right. See you. Bye.